Hey folks, it's Samuel Heber here, back with yet another episode of Heroes of Autism. If you want to follow more episodes of Heroes of Autism, please check out my YouTube channel and subscribe below. So we're releasing a lot more episodes throughout the year. I'm here with Amy, who is a mother of three, who is also on the autism spectrum like myself, and we are going to be talking about her life. Amy, can you start by telling the folks a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so hi, my name's Amy. I'm from Utah. I've lived in Utah my whole life. I am married, remarried, one child from previous marriage, and my husband and I now have been married for 11 years, and we have three kiddos, all on the spectrum, all with different types of autism. And I'm on the spectrum myself, as you mentioned.
Awesome, and it's great that you guys have seen a very lovely family. But let's talk a bit about your own diagnosis, and how has that helped you understand your children who are also on the spectrum?
Yeah, I was one of those that didn't realize I had those symptoms or characteristics until seeking diagnosis for my own children. And it kind of came about from my oldest child, who he was diagnosed with autism around the age of 2, and going through those processes and realizing with his starting of kindergarten, he had ADHD as well. Going through those checklists and seeking help for him was kind of what made me realize, hey, 8 out of 10 of these are applying to me as well. So I personally have Asperger's and or ADHD, or I have Asperger's that presents very much like ADHD. But I think without that, I would really struggle to understand my kids. I feared that without having that common ground, I would struggle to relate to, what do you mean you just have to do this, or you just can't help this, or can't not do something. So I really use it as a disadvantage and try to just keep that perspective. So it definitely helps relate a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can personally relate to that because as a former educator, it helped me really relate to my autistic students a lot. Really, understand that what they can and can't do.
Yes.
Or how to get them from I can't do this to how can you do this, even if it's
Right.
it's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding a lot of parents I talk to, like yourself, that when they go through the diagnosis process with their children, they do indeed find out that they themselves are on the spectrum.
Yeah, it's kind of like, where did they get it from, right?
Right.
when there's a genetic component, and that's clearly the case in our family. So definitely.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case in my family. I think I'm the first one in my family to be officially diagnosed, but you meet, some of my family, you would guess the same.
Yeah,
Um,
opens a lot of doors though, so it helps.
mhm.
Important to get those diagnoses, even though it's not something you want to hear. As we all know, getting that on paper opens doors, so it's a necessary but tough part of the process, I would say.
Definitely. So one of the big things that's often talked about in autism circles is the power of schedules and routines. Which one do you find to be the most effective for you and your children?
Well, I learned the hard way. Just schedules are hard, and that can be with kids that don't have those extra unexpected things you can't predict, prevent, control. Kids with special needs, needless to say, those pop up quite a bit more. So I largely find a routine is much better. It's taken a lot of practice, but my main thing is just to try to not stress and focus more on what we need to do, priorities, than this happening at this exact time. But we've had times where we have all three kids in 3 different schools, 3 different schedules, and you're just schedule juggling all day. And that's why I hate schedules, because when that one thing goes wrong, which it will, it all falls out from underneath you. So I actually use what's called the block schedule, or time blocking. It's kind of a little system I use that I've kind of honed and perfected, and I share it with other autism moms, but that has really made a difference for me. So in a nutshell, routine over schedule any day. It makes a big difference, for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a similar thing doing my own schedule because it allows us to go with the flow rather than we only have we missed the time frame for
Right.
to do
Gotta have
that
that
thing.
flexibility, yeah.
And then
No flexibility, a break.
And then if we don't get that thing done, we just move it on over to the next day until it gets done.
Exactly. That's where the no stress comes in. Just do your best. All you can do day by day. So I agree.
But that is often contradictory to what the experts tell us about autism, that we need that strict. This is when something happens. But what I have found, and what seems what you have found, like that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. As long as you and your children know, I guess in general, what's happening and when it's happening, when these blocks are, that's what
Right.
matters. And also, I think that's more realistic too, because like
Yes.
no one can stick to a schedule to a T.
Exactly. Nobody.
Like you
Nobody.
said, like you said, one thing falls, and the whole schedule falls.
Right. This is the house that Jack built, and on, and the foundation is crumbling when one thing goes wrong. So, yeah. And I learned that the hard way. I tried to keep a schedule for years, and that's what I found was the problem. It's just not realistic. So that's why I like the block scheduling, because the kids know this is mom's work block. If she's not doing this with me right now, I know I have a block later or a turn. So they know that's coming up. And then that just kind of helps everything work together cohesively when we're all on the same page. No, it doesn't always go perfectly, but yeah, schedules are too hard. Got to have that flexibility for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest lesson across the board, no matter where our children are, you or I, Amy, as autistic adults, experience to have flexibility. It can be very hard with autistic people because we have a very fixed mindset on when things need to happen. And we're often asked us, how do we break that fixed mindset? Well, we have to create the flexibility ourselves rather than depending on others to break that fixed mindset.
Right. You have to accommodate yourself because others won't.
Because if it's our choice to be flexible, it makes us more willing to do that thing or change things up. But
I agree. Yeah.
And the other huge thing for autistic,
like structure is helpful, but too rigid is too much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the other humongous thing that I've dealt with as an autistic adult is self-care, especially when I'm having sensory issues. Because there's not like mom or dad or a teacher's aide hovering behind us, ready to like go all Avengers on us and save the day when we're having sensory issues.
Right.
For you, what do you do to take care of yourself when you're having sensory issues?
So I don't have too many. I'm pretty fortunate in that way, or mine are more minimal. But I would say it's not specific noises, but when there's just people talking, fans on, machines running, it's kind of weird, but I personally have a thing with fans. There are fans going in my house all the time. So it's just, my kids sleep with it. My husband likes to always have, circulation going. And I've kind of learned to deal with it, but that's one thing I've realized I can't tune that out. It's like a whole level of noise that just adds layer upon layer. And so if I have to, I'll say, hey, turn it off. Or when we just, that can't be done for whatever reason, I'll just try to kind of change my environment. I found even 3 deep breaths, it's amazing what that can do when you're focused on it and willing and ready to let that work. Because anybody can just say, oh yeah, okay, 3 deep breaths. Okay, that did nothing, but it's not going to work if you don't think it will, so just trying to find little ways to kind of change the environment or diffuse if it's noise, for example, that's kind of wearing on me. I find that's helpful. I also really like the little scent rollers for diffusers. I'll kind of put a couple of dots on my wrist. The smell does something for me, but I find just that act of doing something else, the distraction itself, kind of helps too. So just any way I can change my environment or tone it down. If I really need to and it can be done, I'll go take a walk or go for a drive. When I can't do that, my dog is a great sensory fulfiller for me, and just that calming effect that dogs and cats have on anybody really. So there's a few different things I do, and it kind of depends on the situation. But yeah, and I think we all have things we have to do to deal autism or sensory issues or not, and those are mine. So that's what I find helps.
I think those are great tips. And folks, what she's talking about when it comes to using sense or your dog or what is reestablishing trust with your environment. For those of you who are not autistic and don't understand why this is so important, is that often when we're jarred through sensory overload, we don't trust our environment anymore, and it triggers our fight or flight response, which every human being has to some extent. For autistic people, it gets triggered in the day, not a saber-toothed tiger's coming at you. It's not as obvious a threat, to a neurotypical person, but for us, it's the same fear overwhelms us, and we need to reestablish trust with the real world.
Right, I agree.
That's what Amy's talking about, and I'm sure your children also need to reestablish that trust. So how do you help your children who are also on the spectrum reestablish trust with their environment when they're having their issues?
Yeah, my kids are all so different. And I mean, you know, they are half siblings, my oldest and my younger two, but I have to take different approaches for each one. My oldest, he's very high functioning. He's 15. He's the more, if it's bad enough that I need something, I will let you know. Otherwise, he takes the typical teenager. I'm going to go shut myself in my room for a while. So I try to keep with him a happy medium of letting him know, hey, I'm here. You can talk to me. You can tell me anything, but I don't want to like pester him, be in his face to make him push me away, you know? So just remind him. And no matter how many times you tell kids things, I love you, you can always tell me anything. I think they always need those reminders. So that's kind of what I do with him. My middle kiddo, I wouldn't classify him as severe, but relatively speaking for the rest of my children, he's the most severe one. He is verbal, but he's our biggest stimmer. I'm surprised we haven't heard him in the background yet, but he's very like, if he gets hurt, he gets mad. And he's the one where it's like, less is more approach works better. Like if he's upset, I don't even talk to him. I just, if he needs a Band-Aid, okay. I won't make eye contact. I'll give him the Band-Aid. And I've literally filmed this and tried it both ways. And he's the less is more approach. That works better. Then my daughter, I thought for sure she had ADHD, not autism, because hers presents so behaviorally, like emotionally. And hers is very like, you have to take your time, sweet talk her, coddle her, you know, she gets an unexpected touch and you think someone just stuck her with a hot poker, you know, so she's the one that like intensifies it. But I think that's true with any kid, autism family or not, that they all have their own methods. And I've found my kids all take a very different approach. There are some things that help me that help them. Like if we're doing homeschool and they're fed up or they're struggling or kind of burnt out, we'll bust out the sense, or we'll do like a little sensory thing, or do a go noodle brain break. But definitely they all have very unique needs, and that's not something you learn overnight. So they're
Right.
they're all a unique package. That's the best way to put it, and you have to approach them as such. So autism or not, they're very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very different. And I think you illustrated it perfectly. Even within your family, you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, or one adult, in your case.
Right.
Because my autism is different than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my point here, folks, is that we're trying to end the stigma of the fact that just because we have the same diagnosis, me and Amy, that doesn't mean we're the same person. And
right. I mean, my own 3 kids, very, very different, but all with autism and in the same family, but worlds apart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huge spectrum there for sure.
Definitely. All right, so my next question for you is, how do you meet your children who are on the spectrum's needs, especially when they are so different and they're all demanding your attention all at once?
When they all want things at once, I kind of prioritize. Like if someone's hurt, but someone's just upset, you got to go for that priority. If not, I largely teach my children, there's 3 of you, there's 1 of me. I'm not a robot. I'm not a machine. You know, you guys don't treat me like that. And take turns, line up, wait your turn. That's about all you can do. But, you know, I have moms that say, oh, well, I shouldn't complain to you when I'm struggling with one kid, because I do know what that's like. My one child was the only child, or my oldest, sorry, was the only one for like 6 years. And I have had where it's the one kid takes up as much as 3 because they can. There's not those other kids there to divvy up that attention in that time. But my kids have just had to learn that when it's all hitting the fan at once, it's either order of arrival or like the ER. Who's hurt the worst goes first, so to speak. So that's kind of the simplest way I can break it down, and the most fair way I can help them when that happens. And hopefully that's not too much, because those are fun times. But yeah, that's a good question.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that that's the hugest thing, is prioritizing the big versus small problems. Which is also a very hard thing for people on the spectrum in general to do. Is usually all problems we perceive is equally as important.
Top priority.
So kudos for you to be able to have that cognitive ability to tell the difference between big and small problems.
They don't always agree though. Yeah, that's where it can get tricky. And so that's where I try to, if I am stressed, I try to not show it, because then, oh, well, mom's stressed, there's something going on. What do we need to be stressed about? You know what I mean? So that's another factor to it I forgot to add. But yeah, because they'll get onto you, if you let it show, so to speak. So it's not to say that I'm faking or not being genuine, but yeah, like when there's a scary situation, you don't want to show them you're scared, because they look to you to know how to act or react. So that's one thing I think that could help any parent, autism kids or not, all three needing something at once or not is just kind of fake it till you make it, I guess. Yeah, that helps a lot for sure, though.
Yeah, I totally agree. Is learning to center yourself before you address your kids' problems, because often the perception of autistic children is that they're not aware of other people's feelings or other people's stresses in this scenario, but we do pick up on it. We may not be able to understand why you're stressed, but we understand that you are stressed. So finding yourself, ground yourself before you address your kids' problems, even if you only have like 30 seconds to do so.
Right. Just one deep breath. Hey, whatever you got, go for it. Exactly.
And now to switch gears for a moment here. We're gonna now talk about you, Amy. What was it like for you as an autistic woman to go dating? Can you give us one good example, one bad example?
I think, yeah, good example. Again, you've met one person with autism, you've met one, but I would say, I don't want to say majority or in general, but to an extent, people with autism are very genuine, authentic. I don't need to tell you that. Not to say that we couldn't or don't sometimes mask things, but I think my point in that is that, sometimes it's hard. It was hard for me to tell attraction between attention and like genuine good intent attention, like to make a connection. And so, I used to be like forgiving and trusting almost to a fault, and that kind of taught me anyone can act with good intentions or be kind, but there's those different kinds of attention, and you need to learn how to distinguish what's attention and attraction, if you understand what I'm saying, and how to kind of filter out the people that are there to give attention for connection, not just for attraction. A good example, though, that's kind of a bad example, I guess, of some things that maybe I struggled with or I could have done better. So good examples, though, is that, I would find a lot of guys would say, you're a lot different than a lot of other women because you kind of can't help but be genuine or authentic. And that can be very appealing to someone because they know there's not going to be the mind games or the lying, or you're just trying to lead them on or give whatever false impression. So that was something that kind of helped me, is that I can only fake it to an extent, and when I say fake it, I mean like, no, you don't want to be stimming in public because you should be able to, but you just can't this day and age without other problems. But I always found that was kind of, I guess, to my benefit, was that I just naturally, I like to just, hey, this is how I am, take it or leave it. And I found a lot of people responded positively to that. So that was a plus. For your follow-up question, which I know likely what's my tips for women dating on the spectrum, if I'm going in the right direction there, I would say, we talked about this earlier, I know, but disclosure is important. And that, again, can be at their discretion. It could depend on the situation, the person, or when you may want to give that disclosure. But I think you're only going to go so far with that person if you don't tell them, hey, this is how I am, is that okay with you? And they need to be able to communicate like both ways as equally and transparently, like, hey, I understand you can't help this, but I can't help that bugs me. Where can we meet in the middle? Like those kinds of boundaries or deal breakers, deal makers, I think are good to establish in the beginning. And you need to have someone that is going to accept that and be willing to accommodate you, but you have to be willing back. You can't just say, well, I have autism, so you accommodate me. It's a one-way street. I think it's important for that to go both ways. And, again, that's going to be each person's discretion when they disclose it, if they disclose it. But I think if should not be the question. I think it should be disclosed to have any hope of a lasting connection, depending on what you're looking for. So just definitely full disclosure, and if possible, upfront is what I would say for advice.
All right, and I think you're right. And one of the key things is, being comfortable talking about your autism and sharing with your date, or if they're by the point you share, your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or whatever. Which with past students that are female that I've had, or clients, how do you want to phrase it? This can be kind of tricky, because does that mean you unload your whole baggage of everything that is, for this case, Amy's autism, or do you talk about like over time, because sometimes, especially if it's like a first or third date, like if you just suddenly went like, here's all my baggage, bam, like
Right. Throw it on the table.
that can scare away a lot of people. Or do you advise young ladies on the spectrum to tell their partner slowly over time, like, I have autism, and then as things come up, like sensory issues, explaining it, which have you found to be more effective? Just dropping the whole load, or giving them little pieces at a time?
Well, and see, I didn't know that I had autism when I was dating, because obviously it was after I had been married and remarried and started to find my kid's diagnosis. But if I had to guess how I would feel if I had already known, that's kind of tough, because I think it's very situational. It depends on that person. It depends on that situation. But mostly it depends on the person who needs to disclose it. If they feel that person they might want to continue a relationship with, then yes, they're worthy of disclosing that too. But the timing, yeah, that's a hard one, because I would say don't wait for that ideal time, because there's not going to be it. But again, that's hard. I don't think there's like a hard set rule, yes or no, or on the first date or on the third date. That one's very situational. So that's kind of hard for me to answer. I'm sorry. That's my best take on it. I don't know.
I guess since you got diagnosed so late, when you meet somebody new and you're explaining your autism, do you, like, you're making a new friendship, for example, since you're no longer trying to find a new partner because you're married, how would you disclose to that person, like say you and I just met for the first time and you're like, all right, I'm going to disclose to Sam I have autism. Would you just tell me everything at once, or would you be like a little bit, and then the next time I saw you?
Right.
How would you disclose it to me?
I used to be more selective with disclosing it, and because I had an irrational fear that if people know I have autism, they're going to think I'm not competent to care for my kids and kids with extra challenges. I've kind of gotten over that. I have kind of begun to more share, like with my son's other classmates' parents. It's kind of a newer thing, honestly, within the last year or two, to be more open about it. So I don't just, as a hard rule, disclose it to everyone. And I guess my sort of method is I don't like to, unless it's maybe a situation to go meet other adults with autism, I don't like to disclose it right away. And because I like the person to have that chance to get their impression of me without knowing that, because you can't help but feel every connection or thought that they have about you, they're going to say, oh, but is that her, or is that the autism? And that may sound weird to some, but I kind of like to give them the chance to see me without seeing me through the autism filter, to not make those judgments too early on. And honestly, I've gotten to where I don't care what they think or judge or not, but I don't just disclose it right away. If I was going to, or when I did, a lot of times I'll find myself disclosing it, like if I catch myself info dumping or getting overexcited about, we have our subjects, and I can tell the person's kind of like, oh, wow, you're really into this. And I'll kind of say, hey, I don't know if you know, but I have Asperger's. That's kind of why maybe I do this or this like this. So that's really often time I disclose it, when I feel maybe people don't know and my autism is showing, as I say, and I don't care if it shows. But yeah, that's kind of a weird one for me, because I don't just throw it out there. I like to give them the chance to see me without the autism label, but I don't have holdbacks to disclosing it. But I'll sometimes kind of use an example when I'm having one of those moments, so that they can see this is not just personality flaw. This is how my autism is for me. This is one of the things that I can only help to an extent. So it's a package deal, take it or leave it, your choice, and that's kind of how I go about it when I do disclose it. So yeah, that's not a hard set rule again.
Yeah, Amy, I think that's perfect, because you're leading with who are, not autism. I made the mistake of leading with immediately talking about my autism, just trying to get it out of the way. But then that's how the person sees me, as autism, not Sam.
Right.
The key is just be who you are, and then as the autistic behaviors come up, you explain why you did what you did, like stimming or any other behaviors that relate to your autistic traits. I think that's the way, because the thing I learned in college was, if your autism doesn't bother you, it won't bother the other person.
Exactly. If you can accept it, they can.
And that if it does bother the other person, then you're not meant to be friends, and that's okay.
Exactly. You don't need to hate them or hold resentment, but they're not going to be your best man at your wedding. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question we have here, and it's the big one that I always ask everyone that ever comes on my show, is
Hmm.
if you could change the way the world sees autism in one way, what would it be?
Well, to sum it up, I wish they would see it as just different, not less. I was thinking about this a little bit last night and this morning, knowing you're going to be asking me this. And I kind of came up with the analogy of I wish people would see it like a rainbow. There's so many parts to it. There's not one that's like another. They all have a spectrum of awesome things within it. They all go together to make an awesome package. And there's not really one bad or better or worse part of it. It's just
Mhm.
amazing, just all in itself, right? So, and it's kind of a spectrum too. But my big thing, yeah, is just neurodiversity. Like we need those different perspectives and points of view, and that's those kinds of outside the box thinking are things that have gotten us some of our biggest advances. Whether technology or engineering, people like Einstein. For those people to be discredited, I can't imagine how in the dark we would still be, and for how many people don't realize those are the kinds of minds that keep pushing the world forward. How can we discredit that? And just that everyone has a place and a gift somewhere. It's just might be the struggle of finding that niche. But yeah, in a nutshell, different, not less. And it's just different abilities, not
Mhm.
any disability, I guess is a good way to put it. So yeah, just everything about a rainbow is great. It's a package deal. No two are alike. And yeah, people could see autism the same way when they say it's a spectrum. That would be great.
Yeah,
So a lot of
I
work there though, for sure.
yeah, it's a lot of work, but then it's a lot of work just to be human in general. And I think
Right.
you hit the nail on the head that like you wouldn't dismiss Einstein or Steve Jobs or John Lennon or really anyone or Tesla. Or the guy who invented
Right.
Pokemon, all on the spectrum, all different minds, that have really shaped a large parts of different parts of society. And
Hmm.
I think once people start realizing that autistic minds have been shaping our entire technological and world,
Right.
the stigma will just, I think, vanish.
Exactly. I mean, if they could see, oops, sorry about that.
Mhm.
If they could, yeah, see the whole spectrum and not just the stimming or the meltdowns, they would see the other amazing parts that
Mhm.
accompany the struggles. But yeah, just I think the different, not less, is a good phrase to put it. But yeah, the rainbow kind of being a good analogy. There's really no wrong or bad one. They're just all different, but they're all great. So yeah, I agree. We need those different perspectives, because otherwise, it's like I tell my kids, if everybody liked to bake bread, nobody liked to make, fixed cards, we'd all be sitting around fat with plenty of bread going nowhere. so,
Uh,
so yeah, we need difference for sure, and different minds,
mhm.
especially true in my book.
Yeah, definitely. And the more people realize that everyone's different and there's no such thing as normal, it's just like I think the world would move forward a lot faster.
I agree.
Uh,
Yep.
and all right, folks. So this has been another episode of Heroes of Autism. Amy will be back in a future episode on a panel with two other mamas who are on this spectrum too, where we'll be talking about the executive dysfunction, which is a huge topic in the autism world. And I'll be going into that panel with her and the two other mamas, what exactly that is, and how we have learned to thrive as parents and be on the spectrum at the same time. So follow Amy. Oh, Amy, where can people follow you and learn more
So
about the awesomeness you are?
thank you. My main platforms I use are Instagram and Facebook. It's just Amy_Gagler. My last name is just like it sounds, Gagler, Gagler. I will tell you, I don't use Facebook a lot, but I have a linked Facebook, so everything I put on Instagram goes to Facebook. And I do have kind of a little community. I have some autism all-stars that all have a niche of expertise for anyone that needs support, help, resources, or at the very least, I can guarantee someone to relate to other parents or adults on the spectrum.
All right, excellent. All right, Amy, thank you so much for coming on my show, folks.
My pleasure.
You'll be seeing Amy again on Heroes of Autism real soon on the panel. It's gonna be a real fun conversation. If you want to see this panel or see the other moms that will be appearing, please subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Huber Family Adventures on Instagram. Follow me on Facebook as Samuel Huber. Follow me on Instagram as Huber Family Adventures. I think I said that. But anyway, folks, thanks to you for joining me for another episode. Please subscribe. Amy, I will see you again on the next episode that I have you.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you.